sorry, that didn't. Okay, so we're just over 20 years old. We launched in 1999. We are one of two journals that's co-owned by the British Academy of Management and Wiley. We publish around 26 papers a year, so those are literature review papers, as Pierre said. Our latest impact factor is 8.6, and this puts us fifth in business and management. So our positioning as a journal has changed a lot over the last 20 years, and especially over the last 10 years. We are a journal that originally published literature reviews across all disciplines. Now we only publish literature reviews at advanced theory. And I'll talk a little bit about that later. So we have quite a lot of downloads considering the small number of papers we publish, almost 500,000 downloads 2 years ago. We are very much an international journal, even though we started as a British journal. Most of our authors come from Europe and Australia, but that international author base is increasing, and certainly our readership is very international. And as you can see by our impact factor, you know, as we shifted over the last 10 years towards lit reviews at advanced theory, you can see that that's had a big impact on our impact factor. We're on a steady increase. And if you compare us with the other two journals that are here today and some other sort of high impact journals, you can see, you know, the power of literature reviews in particular, because a lot of people read them and cite them, and especially literature reviews at advanced theory. And that's exactly what we do. We are a review journal. We publish papers right the way across the disciplines in business and management. All papers in IJMR have to make a unique and significant contribution to theory. And let's say, unlike one of our other competitors, the AMA, Academy of Management Annals, we are methodologically agnostic, so we don't have a preference for a particular type of review method. We publish narrative reviews, systematic literature reviews, bibliometrics, so we don't have a particular preference. Although a paper recently written about review papers across the top review journals says that our journals tend to be more systematic in nature, but that's not a deliberate editorial preference. That's just due to the preferences of our authors and possibly our reviewers. We definitely encourage papers that are interdisciplinary, and we find that these papers are cited more as well. You know, if you think about the problems that we all study as business and management scholars, those problems tend to be interdisciplinary. And as a good basis for the development of theory, we encourage review papers that also cut across disciplines. And this is our tagline. You know, we are a journal that provides strategic platform for new directions in research. So our papers are like a the launchpad for people that are unfamiliar with a particular discipline, or people who are very familiar with it and want a new perspective on the domain, so that they can, you know, it might shape or, you know, spark new ideas in terms of their own research directions. So this is an exercise that one of my co-editors and myself did a few years ago. So we looked at all the papers that were published in IJMR, and we tried to look at the different ways in which these papers develop theory. And we came up with these 8 strategies. So let's say the strategies at the top are what you might find most common in literature reviews. And as a journal, we started, let's say 20 years ago, we published a lot of papers that adopted these strategies. You know, the typical type of strategies like spotting conceptual gaps that we might advise our PhD students to do. But more and more we're publishing papers that move down the list in terms of strategies. So let's say as you move towards the top of the table, these literature reviews tend to stick within a particular discipline in literature. They tend to, for example, to spot gaps or to organize literatures. So a typical type of review might organize a literature into antecedents, process, outcomes. These are very typical type of reviews that we receive. And we also tend to find that these reviews are a little bit descriptive, a little bit predictable, and it can be difficult sometimes to produce insights that are truly novel and truly surprising and interesting from these types of approaches. Certainly not impossible. In this paper that Carolyn and I wrote, you know, there are definite, you know, very strong, high impact, you know, well cited papers that adopt these strategies. Papers then that might problematize a literature. So we tend to publish more of these over the last 5 years. Problematize a literature, or identify contradictions. And effectively what these papers are doing is they're reorganizing our understanding of a particular literature and theory within a domain. They might be problematizing conversations within it, and this can spark new research directions in terms of opening up new avenues of research. But as I said previously, you know, interdisciplinary papers are particularly interesting, and we find that these can be especially innovative. And as an editor, I've been editor with IJMR for 10 years now, and I'm constantly surprised at the way different authors can be creative in their theorizing. So for example, they might take a theory in one domain and apply it to a completely different domain, and that can open up completely new understandings and interpretations of a literature. Or at a higher level of theoretical abstraction, they might apply a metaphor. They might take a metaphor and apply it in a particular literature, you know, organize that literature different, you know, spark new seeds, new, you know, cross-fertilize ideas in new interesting ways. Or they might look at two literatures at the same time, compare and contrast them, you know, cross-transfer concepts and ideas from one to the other. And in the process, what they're doing is blending and merging literatures, you know, with real contributions in both literatures. And we find that these types of papers are really highly cited, mainly because of the fact that they're cutting across disciplines, but also because in many cases they're aligned with real life problems, real organizational problems that really matter to a lot of researchers, and especially to, you know, funders and you know, the sort of external stakeholders that look at the progress of our research and our impact of our research. And this final category, you know, the setting out the new narratives, you know, as I said, there are many innovative ways in which you can write a literature review. The idea that a systematic review is some replicable process that you know, that can be reproduced by anyone, I would really challenge that as an editor. You know, writing a literature review is a highly creative process, especially if you start to develop theory through it. And as I said, you know, our authors are constantly surprising us in terms of how we do that. And I haven't in my presentation talked about the review process because I guess the other journals would have done that, and which they have. But I would definitely call out for reviewers. You know, all of our reviews are ad hoc. We do try to, where there's a good fit, use reviewers from our editorial board. But in general, we use ad hoc reviewers, and it has become a challenge over the last year, especially with the challenges that people are facing with COVID. We desk reject around 80% of the papers. So myself and my two co-editors, we will look at all the papers, and if we don't see potential to develop theory, we won't send it out for review. So if you have an interest in review, really make sure that you run it past colleagues at conferences or colleagues internally in your own institution, and try and get feedback about the potential for developing theory before you send it to us. Because if we can't see that potential, we'll usually desk reject and give you some ideas as to what you might do to take it forward. Okay, so that's all I have to say. I've just got a final slide with details of the other co-editors. So Marian Isaac-White and Jamie Callahan are new co-editors that are joining me this year. And we welcome your submissions. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dermot. Actually, I think it's